Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Tech Tuesday. I am talking to Nick with Thinkie. We first met at CES. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but first this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Nick, welcome to Tech Tuesday and the Foresight platform. I think you may be about the last interview I'm doing from CES in Las Vegas. It was such an interesting experience. In the past, I've hardly known anybody, and I'm wandering all over, and there is this big AARP tech booth, and you were part of that, and you had this wonderful technology to both help figure out what people's brain health age is and to help improve that. So of course, I had to sit down and try it. I expected that it would say my brain health was like, that of a 20-year-old. And it didn't say I was older, but it was very close to my natural age, which was totally depressing. Yeah. So let's actually start with a little bit who you are, what your technology does. I'd actually like to talk a little bit about your inspiration for it too.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me here, Steve. And it was a pleasure to meet you. I'm glad we can now follow up, even though it's a couple months after CES. So the Thinkie story actually is not mine. It starts with our CEO. His name is Kota Agewa. He grew up on Hokkaido Island, Sapporo. We may have heard of it. There's a beer named after it. It's the northernmost island in Japan. And in his life, really instrumental to his formulation as an adult, as a young adult, and then into adulthood, were both of his grandparents. His grandfather especially. Unfortunately, in later life, both of his grandparents started to contract dementia, and they both ended up succumbing to the disease. And that created a real curiosity for Kota on why that happened, what might be possible to prevent it, and what role he could play in that. So for the last 5 years, Kota has been incubating this idea of Thinkie. This is the Thinkie sensor that you wear on your forehead. It's about the size of a cigarette lighter, weighs 30 grams, has a butterfly effect to it, so it can actually conform to your forehead shape. And just in 2023, we launched here in the US, selling to senior living communities, and have had reasonable success with that up to date. In the fall, just before the holidays of last year, we started selling directly to consumers as well. So we've really got a two-sided business, B2B and B2C. But our longest standing is with the senior living communities, primarily here in the Pacific Northwest. We're located in Seattle, but beyond that, we've got others in LA, Chicago, and Florida, as you might imagine.
Terrific. And so let's talk a little bit about what the device does. And I'm going to start by, do you have a headband there you can show?
I do. I can put it on if you like.
It's sort of like wearing a hippie. I felt like I was on my way to Burning Man or something, right? So
yes, exactly. It's well, we hope to be somewhat stylish. Made it black. The Thinkie sensor comes in 5 different colors, one of which is Thinkie pink, which I'm showing you here. But we've got 4 others, including black. You just wear it above either your left eyebrow or your right eyebrow. That's because you've got 2 lobes of the prefrontal cortex. And a little bit about that, if you're not familiar with it. The prefrontal cortex is the last part of the brain to develop in human beings. It's the reason that they won't rent a car to young men under 25, because that prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. And that has to do with decision-making, planning for the future, inhibition, all the things that we see deteriorate in later life as well. So that prefrontal cortex develops around 25 fully, and then unfortunately starts to deteriorate around 30 or 35. And that is what we call, ultimately, when it fully deteriorates, we call that dementia, and that can be a life-ending disease. The sensor will train both lobes of your prefrontal cortex. That's why you wear it above either one eyebrow or the other, and you can switch back and forth. The idea being that much like you would rejuvenate your body when you exercise physically, you want to do the same thing for your mind. The only wrinkle is that when you exercise physically, you get an immediate physical response, elevated blood pressure, heart rate, sweating, breathing, when you're exerting yourself. That's not the case when you're exercising yourself mentally. You need to have something like the Thinkie sensor to tell you whether an exercise or a particular activity is going to be beneficial or whether it's really more spinning your wheels. And like I say, when you exercise physically, you can definitely tell that you're exerting yourself, and you can also tell when you're dogging it, but you don't know that without a sensor for your brain.
So you wear this, and what else?
Yeah, so you wear it on your forehead. It uses near infrared spectroscopy, which sounds complicated, but it's been around for better part of 50 years. It's the same electromagnetic spectrum that your remote control uses. It's just much more sensitive and much more refined. It measures the blood flow to your prefrontal cortex. So it takes that IR and sends it through your skin, your skull, and into your brain, and measures that blood flow. The blood flow is strongly correlated with mental activity. So the greater the blood flow, the greater the mental activity. The greater the mental activity or cognitive load that you have, the more beneficial that's going to be in rejuvenating your brain.
Okay, and so what this sensor does is primarily does monitoring. So the second half of this is actually training part, right? So the first place it starts is an evaluation, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that evaluation process.
Yeah, we've got
the one that completely depressed me, by the way.
Well, it's actually, there's hope here because this is a path to improving, rejuvenating your brain, lowering your brain age, and getting back that mental clarity that you used to have that unfortunately deteriorates with age. But like I say, you can get your physique back if you exercise. You can get your cognition back if you exercise your brain. So there are three things that our app does. Our app runs on iOS and Android, and you just log in directly through the App Store. So there's no need to futz with any sort of login or QR code to get into your account. First, you'll take a brain age assessment, and that is a battery of tests. It doesn't require the sensor. It's just a battery of tests that take about 4 to 5 minutes that measure your mental processing speed, your short-term recall, and your organization, your attention switching. Like I say, you don't need to have the sensor for that, but that'll give you a baseline for where you're at. And typically, chronological age and brain age work in tandem with one another. I just turned 52. But my brain age is actually more like 46 because I've been using Thinkie on a regular basis. I've been working with the firm for over a year at this point. You take that initial test and it'll tell you where's that baseline that you need to look to lower. And then there's 2 ways that you can go about doing that. We offer a suite of 19 different games that allow you to test your short-term memory, your concentration, attention switching, mental speed, all the things that are governed by the prefrontal cortex that deteriorate with age and with time. And that suite of games takes about 60 seconds per game. You would play them for about 10 minutes, variety of different games. They adapt the difficulty. Maybe you're a little sluggish one day. Maybe you're doing particularly sharp. It'll adapt its difficulty to make sure that you have a constant but attainable level of gameplay, a level of challenge. And then the really interesting thing about Thinkie is that you can then wear it to do really anything else. So Steve, I don't know if you have a routine where you like to stimulate your brain in certain ways. A lot of people do Sudoku or jigsaw or word puzzles. Maybe you have a habit already.
So what do I do? So I'm a reader. I assume watching Instagram videos probably doesn't count.
Nope, unfortunately not. Yeah.
And even reading. Yeah, I'm a big reader, and I'm actually pretty big on physical exercise. So I walk typically with a couple hours, an hour or so, hour and a half a day. Does that help?
That helps. It certainly does. But you want to focus on your brain. So while you're doing any activity, you're going to wear the Thinkie sensor, and it will tell you exactly how active your brain is. So as you can probably see behind me, there's a couple guitars. That's what I like to do. I like to perform, sing, and play guitar. And I will wear Thinkie while I do that, and I can see just exactly how I'm exercising my brain at that given moment. There are other people who will play the piano, I know some people who've studied Spanish. You can obviously do the things like Sudoku or the crossword puzzle of the New York Times, jigsaw puzzles. There's all sorts of things. Really, there other people do it while they're gardening, and they just let their mind focus on their work. Really, what you want is a moderate cognitive load. So you mentioned reading. Reading is not quite enough because it doesn't engage as much of your brain as reading out loud. When you read aloud, you have to plan ahead for how you're going to utter the words. You have to listen to yourself as you're uttering them, make sure that you pay attention to your audience. There's a lot more of your brain that's engaged. So we found that universally, reading aloud, almost everybody responds positively to that. So that would just be one wrinkle that you would add to your reading, is just spend time, read one page aloud, see how active your brain is, and then you can see whether that's going to be beneficial to you. The other activity that universally is essentially amounts to balancing your checkbook, doing simple mathematical exercises rapidly. And pretty much everybody the world over will respond to that. But then beyond that, your brain's going to be different from mine. And what you respond to and what I respond to may well be different, in which case you want a sensor to tell you if what you're spending your time on is going to be something that's going to be beneficial and rejuvenating, or if it's more like you're spinning your wheels.
So what about things like journaling or listening to podcasts?
So journaling is a more active activity. I don't know the research behind that. I know that there's, like I said, universally, rapid, simple mathematical exercises and reading aloud pretty much works for everybody. But then you really have to figure out what it is that works for you. So there are folks who will play Mahjong or Sudoku and find that they get habituated over time. That's the other thing that happens, is as you do something, you get better at it because you've engaged your brain's neuroplasticity. And that allows more connections to be made, deeper connections. It makes you, in a sense, smarter, but it also habituates you to that particular activity. So it's not quite as challenging. It's much like when you practice anything, you get better at it over time. And that's the neuroplasticity in action. So you always want to have something that's just a little bit of a challenge as opposed to something that's closer to rote.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, let's talk about money. What's it cost?
So the Thinkie sensor is.
And then I want to go into talking about how you guys are working in senior living community.
Yeah, the Thinkie sensor is a one-time expense, $249. You can buy it for the whole household. So say you're a couple or you've got a family, you can use it. And then you would get an account for everybody so that you can track your brain age and your progress individually. And those are $8.99 a month or $99 a year. So you can also buy those as a package at $349. So it takes care of the first year. So it's one-time expense, like I say, and then you've got that recurring expense where you keep track, and we will then come to you on a regular basis and say, if you maybe have left Thinkie to the side longer than you ought to have, give you a reminder. If you are playing a particular game more than another, we'll help you adjust your expectations and adjust your regimen, your routine. And if you haven't tried out the brain meter, which is the function I was talking about earlier, where you can go do anything off app and measure your brain activity, then we'll prompt you how to do that as well.
Terrific. And so talk to me a little bit about, talk to me about the results you're seeing.
Yeah. So we've been working with a number of just content providers similar to yourself in the 45 to 60 age range, and they have been using it for a couple months, and we've seen some dramatic impact, some tremendous improvement in their brain age. So like I said, you take that brain age test early on, usually the first thing, and then you go through a regimen of just using Thinkie for about 10 minutes a day, 3 times a week. You do that over a month, you'll probably see your brain age reduced by about a year. But we have statistics that'll show if you use it for 90 days consistently, so that 10 minutes a day, 3 days a week, over 90 days, you can take off almost 4 years from your brain age.
Wow.
And we have much longer longitudinal studies that have been done both in the US and Japan, where people have done it when they've done that consistent application of themselves, much like exercising. You have to be consistent about it. You don't always have to be intense. But when they do that consistent application of themselves over a year, they can take a decade off their brain age. So imagine the brain that you had 10 years ago, the wisdom you have now, putting those two together. It's a pretty powerful combination.
So, where are you seeing it used in senior living? I'm going to start with, I'm probably get myself in trouble in using this term, but I'm going to start with worst case. If you have somebody who's already got cognitive decline in a senior living community, in a memory care, does it help there?
It can help. We don't have a lot of statistics that will back that up. There's not a lot of research using Thinkie specifically. What we do know is that it's a great preventative device. So as you start to age, as you start to feel you get brain fog or your memory slips a little bit, maybe you're not concentrating as well, this can be a way to roll back that brain age and give you an advantage before you end up in that sort of pre-dementia or demential stage. So this is Thinkie is not a medical device. It's a preventative general wellness device. We don't use it to cure or diagnose anything. It's really prophylactic in its purpose. That said, we do have some studies that we haven't gone public with that show that it can help. But really who this is for is people who are when it comes to senior living, 55 to 75 year range, who still are healthy and are looking for more of a mental sharpness, more of a mental edge. And one of the things that I should point out that's really interesting is that we've seeded this to a number of senior living communities here in the Puget Sound area. And what they like to do is each individual has a Thinkie, and then they have a Thinkie hour where they tell stories about their past to one another. And that's really interesting because, one, it's familiar territory, but it jogs the memory for the individual who's telling the story. And then it evokes the imagination of the people who are listening. And it's a really simple, kind of elegant way for everybody to get to know one another and at the same time exercise their brains. But again, like I said, it's not for reversing dementia. It's for slowing down that process where you may end up in a dementia state without intervention.
Yeah, I love this idea of getting a bunch of residents together to tell their life stories using this. We don't do enough storytelling in the industry in general. And I think that we have too much Bible bingo and birthday stuff and not enough that's really purposeful. And so this is really, really powerful. And do you have a process where the senior living leadership can actually monitor this with residents, or is it just really dependent on their own individual to have their own app?
So what you ask an interesting question. So the wellness directors, the activities coordinators have access to our dashboard, and they could see on an individual basis, if they're given that access by the residents, then they can monitor the progress and they can see who's making more progress, who maybe isn't applying themselves as often, and find ways to stimulate those people. Not everybody responds to the same thing, both in terms of the training activities as well as the activity that you're grouping that around, the organizing principle. Like the storytelling, just about everybody responds well to, but they'll have, like you said, bingo nights or other sort of semi-competitive nights. Not everybody's really into that, so they can see who responds well and who doesn't, and kind of tailor an individualized program for each one of them. Some groups will go in one direction, maybe individuals will want to do it. What we have seen in addition to that is not only having structured half-hour or hour sessions on a regular basis throughout the week, but also renting it out or loaning it out like a library system where people can take it back to their individual residents, use it for a 12 or a 24-hour period as they like, and then that data is still available to the staff, and they can monitor and see how that progress is being made. And then we're in the process of instituting a sharing function where grandma or grandpa could then send that to their kids or their grandkids and show how they're making progress on an individual basis.
Oh, that's cool. So as I'm looking at this, I sort of see a couple of fascinating questions for me. So have you done any work to see if there's a correlation? You may not have enough data yet to see if there's a correlation between using Thinkie and length of stay. That's first question. Second question would be, any correlation relative to fall prevention? And the third is just sort of more sales oriented. Are you seeing people use it as an effective sales tool?
Yeah. So actually, I would start with that last point first. One of the epiphanies that we had when we were selling to the really to the general management, who then tasks their middle layer with implementing programs around Thinkie, was that they were starting to use it in the sales process. So we actually walked in and they were pitching a prospective family, some seniors with their adult children who were touring the facility, and they were looking at Thinkie while they were doing that, considering it as a way to kind of create a competitive cut above using technology for that particular community. They had actually devised that as a way to become more attractive, which hadn't really occurred to us. And so we're now supporting that process. So yeah, as a sales tactic, we found it actually to be pretty effective as a way to entice residents to consider a particular community. We don't have quite enough data to be able to say that we certainly don't have much in the way of fall prevention, but we don't have quite enough data to be able to say that it will extend length of stay. But I think it's indicative of the fact that the communities are using it as part of the entree to their site. That when they're using it in that way, I think they're pretty sold on the idea that it's going to keep length of stay up.
Yeah, it seems like to me that both length of stay and fall prevention would be natural extensions, and so it'll be interesting to see how you progress, how that works as you go through that process. So I'm a senior living operator. I'm watching this live stream, and I'm thinking this is something I'd really be interested in exploring for my senior living community. Or I'm an executive and I'm looking at it, I'm saying, this might be something I could really use in my organization. What is, do you have packages, or how does that work for operators?
Yeah. Well, you can buy it if you want to try it as an individual or for the household. You can buy it individually from our website, thinkiesystem.com, and give it a shot. We've actually had some senior living communities do that first before they entertain going into more of an enterprise package with us. Like I said, it's $250 one-time expense for the sensor, and then $9 per account per user. But the packages that we've put together are anywhere between 5 and 10 sensors that we'll give on a monthly basis and go through the training so that everybody, both on the staff as well as the residents, fully understand how it works. It's not terribly complicated, but it does require you to be connected to Wi-Fi. If that doesn't happen, then you're going to get an error. It does require you to have Bluetooth on, and that's how you connect to your device, whether it be a phone or a tablet. So if that's not on, again, that can throw an error. It needs to be charged, and it lasts for several hours. But if it's not charged, you're going to run into an issue there. Those are really kind of very mundane but common things that we run into. So we'll provide support for that both up front and on an ongoing basis. About $400 to $800 per community per month for that package of 5 to 10 sensors, and then you can use it for as many users as you want. So we'll provide
that's really good. And I guess the other part of it that I see is, all those little things of connectivity and are super important. But I suspect the other thing that happens for people at home is they use it for a few months and then it sort of drifts off and they don't use it as often as they should. And so in a senior living community, you have this huge opportunity for your life enrichment director to build that into the programming and really make a huge difference in that. So do you have any stories? I should have prepped you with this first, right? I'm a big story guy. Don't think we do enough stories. Any stories about how somebody has used it and they can really see the difference?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we've got a number of them, as a matter of fact. So we're working with a young lady who is in Minneapolis. She has a huge TikTok and Instagram following. She lives with her father, who I think is on the cusp of 80. And they've been using Thinkie both individually and collectively for the last, since September or October. and have both seen tremendous improvement. She scored, I think she's on her, I don't want to out, but let's say 45. And I think she scored in her 50s as an initial brain age and was not happy about that. And her father actually scored better, closer to his chronological age. And so they kind of had a competition between the two of them over the course of the holidays and into the new year to see who could lower their brain age more. And it turns out that the younger brain kind of, accelerates a little bit faster. He made a lot of progress, but then started to plateau. She has made a lot of progress steadily. And, it speaks to the fact that you've got, the younger you are, the more plasticity you can rely on in your brain. But what's interesting is that he has consistently dropped about a year in brain age per month, whereas she had a more precipitous decline initially and then started to level off. So he has managed to shave a year off with every month of use. And like I say, I want to say he's about in his 80s or maybe on the cusp of 80. And then this young lady captures that. She captures videos of herself using it, her father using it, them doing things together. She likes to crochet. He likes to play the piano. They'll do that kind of together. She'll sing while he plays. And it's really kind of heartwarming in a lot of ways to see how this family lives together. You don't always have those intergenerational families. It's really nice to see, but it's also great to then have her come back on a monthly basis and say, look at the progress that I've made while I've been helping my dad out at the same time. She's a mom, she's a wife, she's an entrepreneur, and she's also a caregiver. So she's really a good example of that sandwich generation. And he's somebody who's very reliant on her and her attention. And it's great to see them both progress the way that they have.
So I really like this a lot. And of course, the other thing that's kind of got my head spinning on this is in a senior living community, you could actually sort of gamify this, right? So who can reduce their brain age the most, and you could have a leaderboard and do prizes and explore the kinds of activities that are most effective, and it could be just a great ton of fun to do that and really make a difference in people's lives.
We have that capability. It is gamified, so you can compete, but you can also opt out of that. We find that younger audiences tend to be more oriented in that direction. Older audiences are more interested in, all right, how have I improved vis-a-vis last year, last month, last week? And so it becomes more of a regimen of care where they'll discuss with their provider or with the activities director how they're making progress, or if they've maybe stalled out, how they need to make some changes. But yeah, we do offer that. It's just we don't find it nearly getting as much use in the senior living communities for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that's probably more related to the life enrichment director who's using it than whether or not the residents are interested in doing that, right? Because we certainly know games are a big part of what happens in life enrichment. Nick, we've got about a little bit less than 2 minutes. I'll give you sort of the last 2 minutes to do just a quick pitch, particularly for people who are in senior living as either family members or residents. And this is really cool. I like this a ton.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, this Thinkie offers a money-back guarantee if you buy it as a consumer directly from our website. We also sell on Amazon. So try it out. See if it works for you. If it doesn't, we're here to help. We offer a lot of handheld support. We'll get on the phone with you and make sure that you have a good experience. We take that much further in the senior living community, where we work very close-knit, especially at the early stages, to make sure there's a smooth knowledge transition, to make sure that there's adoption and an understanding of what the benefits are going to be and really what needs to be done from a compliance standpoint to get those benefits, so that expectations are set appropriately and everybody really knows it's going to take some investment, but that investment will lead to a payoff. And then we can point to case studies of other communities that have had those advances, and we'll work with you to make sure that it's success one way or the other. Really, we want, like you had mentioned, length of stay and fall prevention. As we get more longevity with these communities, we want to see improvements on those particular fronts. So we'll work with every community, make sure they get exactly what they need. This is not a one size fits all.
Cool. Nick, thank you very much. Great conversation. creating wellness as people age is so important. It's nice when you can increase your lifespan, but increasing your health span, increasing
Yeah.
the quality of life during the months and years you have is clearly the most important thing, and this can be a big tool in making that happen. So I appreciate you joining us, and hold on for just a minute after we're off the air.
Thank you for having me.